Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and thank you for joining us today for this special report, Making Schools Safer for Children in Solomon Islands. My name is Amy Richardson, Save the Children New Zealand's Communications Director, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. I'd like to start with a special welcome to our guests. Save the Children's Director of Humanitarian Programs, John Lilo, who is joining us from Honiara, and Grace Savage, Save the Children New Zealand's International Programs Manager and Safe Schools Lead. And she is joining us from Wellington tonight, and she'll be sharing with us how we collaborate with our partners in Solomon Islands to bring this important project to life. And a special ngā mihi nui, and thank you to you all for joining us. We have friends here from all around Aotearoa, and we're extremely pleased you've all made it here today. So as I said before, plug into the chat where you've joined us from. We'd love to hear. And double bonus, you'll see where the chat option is. So you can fire through any questions or comments you have along the way. So that's at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you have any questions for us tonight, just put them into the Q&A section next to the chat at the bottom of your screen. We're about to direct you to a very important link that my friend and colleague Lance should be putting into our chat right now, and that's a special way that you can support the work we're doing in Solomon Islands. As you may already know, we had already secured funding for 8 of the 11 schools that we're working with, and we're asking our generous supporters like you to help us fund the final 3. So a quick update on our fundraising efforts. So far, we've raised enough to almost get 2 schools upgraded, but we're hoping that all you amazing people out there will help us get that final school upgraded. So if you're waiting to contribute to this important project for our Pacific neighbours, now is the perfect time. Please simply click on the link that should be in the chat right now, and remember to pop those questions into the Q&A on the bottom part of the screen as you think of them. Now, we're going to start tonight with a report from ABC Radio from earlier in the year, at the time when the reopening of schools in Solomon Islands was first announced. Thanks, Kat.
Solomon Islands, where after a 5-month layoff as a result of a major COVID-19 outbreak, schools are set to reopen at the end of this month. It's welcome news for parents, as many have spent months trying to homeschool their kids and to keep them occupied. But with Solomon Islands in the midst of its second COVID-19 wave, there's also concerns of the health risk of sending kids back to school. Carolyn Tiraman with more.
For much of the pandemic, Solomon Islands was free from COVID-19, but then, in January, the Delta variant hit. Schools were the first to shut down, and while markets and other operations reopened, schools stayed closed. But now, the Ministry of Education has announced plans to finally open classrooms at the end of this month. It's welcome news for parents like Josie and Ashley. The mother of 3 has been homeschooling her children, but the past couple of months has been challenging.
Like many other parents, I'm very excited to hear this announcement. It's been a very tough first half of the year, not having our kids in school, especially with me and my partner as working parents. So when I heard the announcement, I was very pleased and excited to hear that. So I have 3 boys, but 2 of them are fortunate enough to go to the only international school in the Solomons. So that school offered them online courses, which was a really good initiative, but they came with its challenges. So the idea was to have the kids homeschooled, and the school would provide online classes and courses for them. But as a working parent, that was a very big challenge because we didn't have enough time to be there with the kids to actually sit down with them and help them through the courses. So that one was a big challenge for me.
Since the announcement, have your kids said anything, if they're excited or not excited?
Yes, so my two boys and my niece as well, throughout the first half of the year, they have been wanting to go back to school, probably because they miss their friends, I'm thinking. So I haven't actually talked to them about it yet, but I would imagine that they'd be very happy and pleased to actually go back to school.
The Ministry of Education's Permanent Secretary, Franco Rodi, says health measures will be still in place to avoid any COVID-19 outbreaks at school.
So we will continue with public health measures and some restrictions, at least at the school level, so that, they can observe social distancing as a way to avoid contraction of the infection for those who might be affected or students who might be affected. So here we will enforce those restrictions as well as to emphasize both health and hygiene practices. And of course, we are going to emphasize hand washing, soap, of course, and use of hand sanitizers so that, we can be assure the health of our children in the schools when they do return to the classrooms.
The closure of schools also raised serious concerns about young people being bored and getting involved in antisocial behaviors like drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana. Harry James Olikwailafa is president of the Youth Council in Honiara.
I really support the call for schools to be resumed because from my observation, young people keep on asking their parents when we go back to school. And there are a lot of calls from young people as well. It's, we have colleges, we have tertiary institutions, so everybody asking when we're going back to school. And when you look at the teenagers, I think being away from school, you can see they involve in negative social behaviors. The community and parents don't even want their children to be, part of those activities. When I mean antisocial behavior, I mean, taking drugs, alcohol, and also like petty criminal activities that young people are exposed to. Because you understand that in Solomon Island, there are no restrictions, so it's easy for young people to access substance drugs and also alcohol. So I believe they are looking forward to go back to school. So our colleagues who are parenting, they share their experience of, their children always asking when the school, started, they want to go back to school. So, yeah, I think everyone is excited to go back to school.
Solomon Island schools will resume on June the 1st.
Thank you so much for that. Now, we seem to be having a couple of issues with our chat function. It looks like it's not working. So if you've got any questions, just pop them into the Q&A part rather than the chat at this stage, and we'll try and clear that up. But let's go on. So that situation report from earlier in the year gives us some context of the disruption that the pandemic had on children's learning in Solomon Islands this year, and the importance of getting children back to school. So I'm going to start with you, John. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us about how the staged return to school is working out in Solomon Islands and what some of the issues that schools are having in ensuring children are safe from other potential outbreaks of COVID or other illnesses?
Thank you, Amy. When COVID arrived, the actual transmission came, we had to deal with that, which means the schools were the first to shut down. And therefore children are not going to school. But they are very eager at that time to return to school. And the Ministry of Education helped out with remote learning for students during that time to support their learning. Although that went on to support the children's learning, it was a bit of a challenge, as we've heard from our previous report that was shared by ABC Radio, that not a lot of children can, access radio and follow the learning, remote learning sessions that were on the radio. So finally, when the ministry announced that school will be starting back in June this year, children were really eager to go back to school. So we were able to see some schools starting, but not everyone starting at the same time. And that has been down to the issues around schools being able to reopen safely, because the government also has requirements that the schools need to meet in terms of reopening schools. And one of the things around the reopening of schools is that schools need to have proper wash facilities to be able to ensure that they practice hygiene practices to protect them from COVID as well. So that is why this project is really helpful and is going to support schools in where we will be working to continue their education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. So tell us a little bit more about the WASH project. So that WASH stands for water, sanitation and hygiene. So tell us about what the project hopes to achieve and why it's important for children in Solomon Islands.
Thank you, Amy. The project will basically work with 11 schools in 2 provinces. So that's Malaita Province and Western Province, to support the schools to upgrade their wash facilities, so that that can allow schools to reopen safely in the context of COVID. So that will support a lot of children to go back to school. So around 5,000 children will be supported in this project. The project will work in partnership with school boards, school communities, provincial education authorities, and the National Ministry of Education staff and students. So the project will create the required WASH infrastructure and information to allow schools to reopen safely for students within COVID, and ensure WASH facilities are climate and disaster resilient. And lastly, ensuring that children and the school communities are safer in the face of ongoing disease outbreaks in the selected communities. This project aligns with the Ministry of Education national standards for school WASH facilities and their education in emergency policy, and the work and objectives of the National Disaster Management Office. And so 6 of the proposed schools that will be supported are also supported by a current project funded under our UNDP. However, the UNDP funding for these schools is not sufficient to allow all Ministry of Education's COVID safe return to school essential WASH actions to be implemented. So this proposed COVID WASH safe bike to school project will fill gaps and primarily focus on the sanitation needs of these 6 targeted schools. In addition, the COVID WASH safe bike to school project will work with an additional 5 schools who are not currently receiving any other WASH funding. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, John. So just to clarify, and I know that this is something that we've talked about in the past too, so the current situation in Solomon Islands for wash facilities over, now I understand there's around 1,000 schools across Solomon Islands. What type of infrastructure is already in existence, and why is these types of projects so important?
Thank you, Amy. So the project, like the current project, will work with schools to upgrade some of their facilities, because not the schools don't have the proper facilities in place. So the project will ensure that the schools have water collection centers, or here in Solomon we call it water tanks, or hand washing stations that can be supported for the children to get clean drinking water, and also they're able to wash their hands, but also to support schools to have sanitation facilities for the students. Not all schools have, as I mentioned earlier, the proper facilities. So having these facilities would enable them, because although even before COVID, all these issues are our development issues all along, and COVID comes, it exacerbates the situation for children. So having these facilities will be able to support their learning to continue.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And as we said earlier, you can help support this really important project by making a donation tonight. We still have one more school to raise money for, and we're really hopeful that you'll help us get there. So thanks again, John. One of the things you mentioned earlier was around ensuring that the infrastructure is climate and disaster ready, if you like. So Grace, we'll get on to you shortly, because I know that this is an area that you are really hot on as our Safe Schools lead here in New Zealand. So John, can you talk a bit about what that actually means? Like, how do you ensure that the infrastructure is kind of built to last and withstand some of the, we know that climate change events, sadly, are becoming more frequent. So how do we ensure that this project is sustainable?
Thanks, Amy. The project will ensure that there are proper assessments conducted in the first place. So this means conducting risk assessments and environmental impact assessments, so that the facilities that we construct take into considerations any risk, and also risk related to hazards like cyclone and earthquake, etc. Because we know Solomon Islands is prone to natural hazards. The project will also ensure that facilities are in line with the national standards, as I spoke to earlier, and we will work closely with the government authorities and their engineers to support the constructions. We will also work with WASH committees in the schools to look after the facilities, and the project will provide training and support on operation and maintenance of the facilities, so that they can continue to manage the facilities even after the project. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John. It looks like our chat is fixed now, so feel free to jump in there, anyone that has any thoughts or comments or questions to make along the way too. So thank you for getting that all fixed for us, Kat, who is hiding behind the Save the Children New Zealand screen. It's a bit like Play School, really, isn't it? For those who would be old enough like me to remember that show. Now I'm going to move on to you, Grace. As I mentioned at the beginning, Grace is one of our international programs managers here in Save the Children New Zealand. She's also a specialist in program management in remote and fragile contexts. She has more than a decade's experience working in development and emergency response, managing teams in remote locations, conflict, post-conflict settings, and in response to natural disasters in Uganda, Lebanon, Iraq, Mozambique, Vanuatu. Grace, you're amazing. We're proud of you. Prior to this, Grace has worked in children's mental health for several years, moving from the UK to Uganda to work with conflict-affected children and youth. And she's our lead on our Safe Schools programs in the Pacific, which are supported, very generously supported by the New Zealand Aid Program. So Grace, tell us how this WASH project fits in the larger context of our Safe Schools programming.
Kia ora, Amy. Thanks for that introduction. So we, as you mentioned, we at Save the Children New Zealand, we support Safe Schools programming across the Pacific and in Asia as well. So in countries like Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands and Laos, all contexts that are really prone to natural disasters, but also have other hazards and risks that can prevent children from going to school and can really impact on children's ability to learn. And so, you know, we were already working with Solomon Islands on Safe Schools programming that was focusing on child protection for children in schools when we heard about the COVID outbreak. And so we reached out to John and his team in Solomon Islands to find out what we could do to support them during the outbreak. And, you know, they let us know that the schools had been closed, obviously to keep the children safe, but there were limits to how much, you know, children could actually access the learning. So for example, we heard in the recording about some children accessing online learning, but actually that's very limited for a context like Solomon Islands, where children live in some very remote locations in a lot of different islands that don't necessarily have internet connection or even the radio connection for the radio education programs they were running as well. You know, so the Ministry of Education over there did a fantastic job really trying to reach as many children as they could, but they knew that they did need to get children back to school to ensure they didn't miss out on too much education. And so, but they wanted them to go back safely. And so the team reached out to us and said, could we help support to improve these water and sanitation and hygiene facilities in schools so they could reopen and the children could go back safely. And this directly aligns with our goals for children to survive, learn and be protected. And it directly lined up with what we're doing with our Safe Schools programming across the Pacific as well. So, you know, we really wanted to support this and add in this extra programming for these schools. You know, as we know, COVID, climate change and conflict are increasingly impacting schools and children's access to education. We know this from our own experiences in New Zealand. But we believe that education is a fundamental right for every child, and that right doesn't end in times of emergency. And not being able to access education increases inequalities and vulnerabilities. You know, and we know that for girls and children with disabilities, they're even more likely to miss out on education due to barriers like, you know, for example, if we don't have toilets in schools, and safe facilities for girls, they're more likely to drop out of school, and not having accessible facilities means children with disabilities won't go to school either. And so, you know, we're really wanting to see better long-term outcomes for children in countries like Solomon Islands. So that's the focus of our Safe Schools programming across the Pacific, and this is how this project fits into that. We want to really encourage you to know that that your support for these WASH facilities is going to ensure that there are children who are able to continue to go to school and to potentially, you know, stay in school for longer and you know, have better outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Grace. That's a really strong partnership right there, and fantastic to hear about. So both John and Grace, I know that many of our supporters listening tonight will be wondering about what it takes to bring a project like this to life. Anyone who's been involved with construction will understand the challenges that these types of projects no doubt will face and can face, and that's without the added complications of working in remote areas, like some of the schools that you were talking about, Grace and John. So John, tell us about how you actually go about upgrading these schools, what it takes, and the logistics involved, I guess.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, so I think the way we go about this project and supporting the schools is a partnership. Partnership is important in terms of ensuring that we work together with the Ministry of Education and relevant stakeholders, and more importantly, with the children themselves in the community, to ensure that the facilities are safe and are accessible by every one of them. And yes, as you rightly mentioned, Amy, Solomon Islands is widely spread islands, which means most of our means of transportation is through boats, and getting to the schools, because they are in remote locations, we have to get them on the boat, go down to the provincial capitals, and then transfer those items to the communities. So it involves a lot of logistics, and with current issues around inflation, especially with other events that are happening in the world right now, affects some of these things in terms of moving things into the community. So yeah, we will definitely have to work together with our stakeholders and our schools to ensure that we can deliver on this project.
Fantastic. It's all about those partnerships and collaborations, isn't it, John? And as we know, with the way that we work here at Save the Children, it's around, responding to the needs of those communities as those communities dictate to us what they actually need. So that's fantastic to hear about. I know that some of those schools are on sides of mountains and things like that. Is that right, John? Describe some of the locations where some of the schools are.
Yes, so like for example in Western Province, 6 of the schools are mostly in islands outside of the main capital. So if we have to reach out to the schools, we have to travel by boats. Our staff go out to the schools by boats. So that also is the means of transporting materials to the schools. And some of them live, especially in Malaita, like right in the middle of the islands. So it's in the mountains. So we have to travel using our vehicle, but our roads sometimes are not really good as well, because it's not like proper tahsil roads, so it's difficult sometimes when it's raining heavily. We will not be able to go immediately to the school. So yeah, it's challenging, but also when we do see things happening in the communities and schools, we are also happy that we are able to support them as well.
That's what I'd love to get onto next, John, actually, is that kind of rewarding aspect of your job. So I know that you've been working with Save the Children for many years in various roles. And we're so grateful for the work you and the team are doing. Tell us what's been the most rewarding part of getting a project like this off the ground.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, seeing the changes that these kinds of projects is making in the lives of people in the community, especially the children that we want to serve. That is my, highest inspiration and motivation in terms of, coming and working in the office every day. It's because of, those children that we want to help change their lives. So, having to see this project making a difference in their lives is, really rewarding and inspiring for me. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Grace, tell us about what about you? What's one of the most rewarding kind of aspects of the job so far on this project?
Thanks, Amy. Well, I mean, we are in the early stages of this project, but it's an incredibly important project that's going to create a safer school environment for children in Solomons now and into the future. We are, COVID-19 is just one of the health risks facing children without safe water, sanitation and hygiene facilities. And well-managed wash infrastructure is vital for keeping children and communities safe. One of the most important parts of this, as John mentioned, is working with the local communities that, and partnering with and responding to their needs. So, hearing that from our team in Solomon Islands is incredibly rewarding. And to be honest, I get to spend a lot of time, on calls with people like John and our project manager, Sophia Suya. And that's incredibly rewarding because they are so passionate about what they're doing. And, when John's describing those, really challenging locations to get to, I can also see, that they're so excited to actually reach those places and be able to make that difference. And I can see, that excitement from the communities and from the children and from the schools reflected in, the conversations that John and Sophia have back with me. So that's really rewarding for me. And, we know that COVID is just one of the health risks facing children. And so, it's really vital that we put this infrastructure in place so that, we keep keeping children, in Solomon Islands and across the Pacific safe from all sorts of, hazards and disasters that they're facing.
Thank you, Grace. And I know that you will be visiting John and the team in a few weeks, which is fantastic news. So I am going to actually, just before we do get on to the next questions, which are from you all, just a reminder for this great donation link is going to pop up in the chat anytime soon in our fixed chat, so that you can all help support this really important project. You've all heard why it matters, and you can help contribute to it, and what a great feeling for us all to be part of that. So we are enabling you to be part of it. So jump on board is what I say. Anyway, right, let's head on to the questions. We've got a few that have popped up in the Q&A here. John, this one's for you. Where is the water for the schools coming from? Is it collected on roofs, or is it taken from nearby waterways, or are you drilling for water?
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for the question. So in our context, it's mainly like in the communities, most people use rainwater harvesting system or rainwater catchment, if you like. So in these schools that we will be supporting, most of them will be, using the rainwater harvesting systems to collect the water, to provide drinking water and also wash facilities as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, John, for that. We've got another question. Where were children going to the toilet before the toilets were built or are being built?
I think if you heard earlier from my comments, most of the schools do not have these facilities. So before that, they were, using the sea or, going into the bush, which is really unsafe. So, this project will really support, getting these children, able to have this kind of facilities so that it's safer for them, and it also helps their learning as well.
Fantastic. Just to clarify the schools, like where the schools are, John, can you just talk us through? So they are in Malaita, and where else?
So we have 11 schools in total. So 6 in Western Province and 5 in Malaita Province. So the six schools initially, as I mentioned earlier, we were working with the similar work with support from UNDP, and part of the UNDP project was, providing water tanks or rainwater harvesting systems for 6 schools. So that's across 3 schools in Malaita and 3 schools in Western Province. But with this project, this will support the original 6 schools with sanitation facilities, and also in addition to the first 6 schools, this project will support additional 5 schools. So that means another 2 in Malaita and 3 in Western Province.
Great. Just to clarify, which island is Western Province on? We've got someone saying that she can see Malaita Island on the map, but she's just wondering where Western Province is.
Thank you. So if you look on the map, you'll see Malaita like further north. Western Province is like on the western direction of Solomon Islands. So you will see there's an island called New Georgia, and there's also other small islands like Kolbangara, Gizo, Vela La Vela. All these islands make up Western Province. So as I mentioned earlier, all these schools are, sitting on some of these islands. So yeah.
And John, you were based, was that right? You were based in Western Province at one point over your career, weren't you? And that was an earlier role. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I was working in Western Province. So our office is in an island called Gizo in the Western Province. So I was working there as project officer earlier, and then I, moved on to other roles like team leader and provincial coordinator. I had a chance to work in other provinces in Solomon Islands as well. But yes, Western Province is where I started my career with Save the Children, and I started my career responding to a disaster event where we had a earthquake and tsunami back in 2007. I don't know if people are aware of this, but it was a really big earthquake, 8.1 earthquake, which triggered a tsunami that affected not only Western Province, but also our neighboring Choiseul Province, which is close to Western. So I started off, responding to that disaster, and that, sort of built me as a person working in this space, trying to support communities. So yeah, my background started with disaster, and I continued on in these other roles that I've just explained.
What are some of the changes that you've seen over that time, John? And in the way that we program, or the way that the types of issues that we're responding to? What are some of the big changes that you've seen?
I think one of the things that I appreciate in terms of our work, especially the communities, is that we are able to work with communities, especially in disaster risk reduction, which means communities are better prepared for disasters, and they're able to bounce back from these kinds of events. So it's good to see that over our programming, communities are much better aware about disasters within their local context, and are able to have plans in place to address some of these things in preparation for a disaster, but also to respond to them once a disaster happens. I've seen that we've developed stronger partnerships and strategic partnerships, especially working with the provincial governments and the national governments to ensure that we have safe communities, and communities are supported through our programs. I think those are some of the things that I can reflect on from our work.
Thank you so much. We've got a question about how much money we're still hoping to raise. I don't have the exact number, I'm afraid, but my understanding is that we still need to raise enough for one more school, which I think is around $50,000 New Zealand. So we are, fingers crossed, hoping that we're going to get some great donations in from everyone tonight. So at this stage, we are out of questions. So I'm going to wrap this up. Oh, it looks like, sorry, we've had one more. This is one for you, John. What do children in Solomon Islands like to do outside of going to school? What have some of the children said to John about what they are looking forward to?
Thank you. I think we've been working in the communities, and I think one of the things that a lot of children raise in terms of their vision is that they are able to go to school and are safe from disasters. They are able to contribute to to ensuring that duty bearers and those who are responsible for children take into consideration their views. And besides going to school, I think, like, as besides going to school, children, they like to also have fun. So making sure that in the safe environment that they have in the communities, and that working with the communities to provide that safe environment.
Yeah, and there's some fabulous work that John and the team have been doing. And if you look on the Save the Children Solomon Islands Facebook page, there's some great videos and images and things of some of those opportunities that the team has given or has worked with children to help empower their voices and have their voices heard, particularly in climate change conversations. I know that, as we all know, youth have really led the charge in the climate change space, and just like youth in New Zealand, youth in Solomon Islands are really leading those conversations too. And Save the Children is working really hard to help amplify those voices, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing on engaging in that climate change space. So fantastic work tonight, team, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I am going to wrap this up and just say a big thank you to you, John and Grace, for being part of tonight's webinar. I'm sure that you have inspired everyone as much as you have me, and I just really am very proud to work with you both, and to be able to showcase this fabulous project to our supporters tonight. So thank you. Thank you very much, Shane, who's just told us that he's just made a donation. So thank you, Shane. Thank you, everyone. You jump on and follow Shane's lead, and help us get to that, reach that final score. So thank you again, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.